Today, the subject of our, testing will be this. This is the motor for my 2009 YZ450F, my bucket brake project. This is the bottom end. We did the top end, and you can see that in the video here. I hope that's the right side. I'm not really sure. So, not really a whole lot to say, but a lot of it's already kind of taken apart, and it's not in the best shape. So it's important that we determine what's usable and what isn't before we get too far into the build. Are you having fun there?
Yes.
Okay. So let's get started with the breakdown. So we're going to start with this outer cover first that, of course, goes up against this side of the motor, but we're going to take this all apart, look at everything, see what's what, and the first thing, of course, right away is we're missing 5 bolts. That's okay, I've got a bolt kit, I'm not worried about that. So we're going to start with the water pump and work our way this way. So the first thing that we need to look at is this impeller shaft, which sits inside and is what is rotated. Let's get these extra bolts out of here. So there's a bearing on the back side that will rotate along with the impeller shaft. And to check the condition of that bearing, I'm going to attempt to get the impeller out. You need a 13mm wrench, goes on the back like that, and then a 12mm socket on an impact is nice, but it's not necessary. Usually just spins right off, so that was easy. And then there's supposed to be a little washer that goes on here. Sometimes it gets stuck to the back, but this one doesn't have one, so that's something that we need to make a mental note about. And then this just pops out through the back side. And you want to make sure none of the fins on this are broken. This one looks good. I have had one with broken fins before. You need as much water being moved through the motor as possible. And then you've got this impeller itself, and it needs to not be pitted or scored in any way. This one's got a little bit of scoring, but nothing that won't come right out with a little bit of polishing. So this one's good to go. So our next piece of analyzation will be this cover here. There's a gasket on the back side. Typically these are in pretty good shape. Mine's a little kind of baked in there, but there we go. Little floppy gasket. You can get them in the water pump rebuild kits or something similar to that. And then any rust in here typically is a bad thing because this is an aluminum part. So this one looks good. No kind of discoloration there. And then we've got the inlet tube right here that connects to the main housing with a 8mm bolt, which we'll get out really quick. And then we can pull out the actual neck here. And then you've got another O-ring here that you want to take care of. Inspect that, same as in the last video with the one that was in the head. This one looks okay, but we're going to replace it anyway. So the next part after the water pump here is this oil filter, which is just a cover, and then there should be an oil filter in there, but as you can see, there is not. There are also these 3 O-rings here that I'm going to take out of the case and put off to the side here, where I'm going to put the oil filter cover and the bolts that I have with it. Because I don't have all of the bolts. There was a 3rd one in there. Fun. Or a 4th one. Are you ready to go inside? Not much to this part, so we're going to move straight over to the clutch cover, which just has these bolts all around, and these 2 attach into the case itself, so those are already going to be out. And sometimes these cases need just a little bit of encouragement to come off. So now that that's off, there's a gasket here, and then there's some dowel pins that you need to be mindful of in these 2 corners. And then you want to look for any kind of damage here. This one's got some light stress cracks right there, but nothing that's coming through to the other side, so this cover should work fine. We just have this outer cover itself. It's got some seals, but I don't see any obvious damage. Nothing too much to look for there, and we'll talk about the seals and the bearings and all that stuff in a different video. So conveniently for me, the clutch is already removed, which isn't that big of a deal because I can just kind of explain it. Because it kind of works the same either way. You're going to undo all these guys, and then this top plate comes off like that. And then if you're still inside the motor, you're going to have this piece that comes out, and then if you'll come over here, it corresponds to this little ball, and there's a shaft right there that I'm going to try and get out.
Oh.
That makes up the clutch assembly, just these little guys here. After you get the plate off, you're going to have a nut under there, which screws onto this main shaft for the transmission. And then that's all you can just take all that right out. And then of course your plates and spacers come out just like that. And then your boss comes out, and there's the washer. And this washer goes in the middle, and then you just have your hub. This hub actually needs to be replaced already because it's got broken gears right there and a lot of damage to it. But another sign to check for wear is these grooves right there. You don't want to see a lot of grooves. The more grooves, the more worn the clutch boss or the clutch hub is. This one, the grooves aren't terrible. They're not the worst thing ever, but this broken gear here is bad news, and I need to add one of these to the list of parts. So Camera Girl reminded me of something that's very important. It's not the most important thing in the world, but it is a good practice. So what you want to do is just fill a container with some oil that you don't use for a lot of things. We've just got this jug that kind of sits around, and I just use this. I've used this same jug for a lot of different things. So you just want to take the clutch plates and see how they're kind of dry and, well, they're not dry, but they've got gross oil on them. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take them, I'm going to put them inside of this oil, and I'm going to kind of spread them out so that they can get covered, and then I'm going to kind of move the oil around and let it soak all of the individual plates so that when it's time to put the motor back together, they won't be disgusting. Well, they'll be a mess, but they won't be stuck together and kind of fused. The next thing I'm going to do is we're actually going to start working on the motor itself. We're going to take off all these gears, and we'll first probably get rid of this really gross tag.
What is it?
It's an assessment of the motor. If you want to read that, if you can, then go ahead. So this is the kickstart mechanism. It's just got a spring that's clipped in down here. Pull that up, and then it'll shoot the spring out of the way, and then this should just fall right out. And there's a washer on the back side that always manages to hide. And then I'm going to set the Kickstarter spring just like that, and I'm going to organize all the gears as they go inside the motor. So these are all held on by snap rings. I'm just going to open them up and take off the gears. These gears are in really rough shape. I'm hoping that they'll clean up when I wash them. They will. But you've got a washer right here on top, and the snap ring goes like that. I like your enthusiasm. Okay.
It's just like dust and stuff.
Let's hope so. And there's another one down here. You're going to do the same thing. Got it.
Oh, you got it.
Snap ring. And then, again, this idler gear comes off, and it's also got a washer. And I'm going to put it right like that. We'll show you the organization in a minute. These next two, the primary gear here and the counterbalance gear here, are a little bit trickier, but we should be able to get them off, no problem. So the main problem is I've got this little Motion Pro gear jammer, but it doesn't fit under here because of this lip. And so if you use a nickel, a lot of people say a penny, but pennies just give too easily. And so I'm just going to jam a nickel in there, and that'll lock up the gears, and then I can put some torque on this nut. Anybody like a nickel?
You think it'll go through the coin slot?
Maybe, but if you ask me, this nickel is toast.
Oh, dang it.
Got it. Little heat in the impact.
Little heat.
Forgot it's hot. Let me get this back on the table. Okay, keep this out.
Oh, do I still need to be?
Now, we can get this gear off. It's still kind of hot. And then we're going to leave this gear on so that we can help get this one off. But for now, this can go over to our...
Stop touching it.
No, I like burning hot things. So, this one's next, and I can tell that this hasn't been off because this wing here is really close to the nut, which is going to make it really fun to get off.
It'll be fine.
That'll work. Boom. Don't touch it. Okay. Still can't take this off yet because there is another
Be careful.
on the other side. Now we need to move to the other side of the motor. So we can get all the stuff on this side out to get a bolt back there. See how those are really hexagon and they don't look like they got a lot of wear on them?
Hmm.
This machine has sat for a long time. Wow. Look at that. Very clean.
Yeah.
See that good? Look up in there. Not too shabby, except it's got a little bit of... See that big tooth?
Yeah. Oh, that's from the clutch?
I think that's from the clutch. But the magnet here on the flywheel caught it. There's a lot of metal bits in there, so we'll see. Hopefully it doesn't need too much.
What's all that gunky stuff on that?
Oh, that?
Uh-huh.
That's the epoxy I was talking about yesterday.
Oh.
And actually I'm kind of concerned about it, but we'll deal with that in a minute. So we need to get this whole assembly out. And this one should come off no problem. There it comes. And there's a washer on the back side, so make sure you got that. And then I'm going to go grab the puller. This is a Motion Pro M24 by 1.5 flywheel puller. This is what this bike needs so that you can pull the flywheel. You take the threads and you turn them the same way as a normal bolt. Some of these are left-hand threads, but these are still right-handed threads. Just going to tighten it up all the way on there. And then you're going to start threading this bolt in until you feel resistance. So then you're just going to take your drill and tighten. And it'll pull it right off. Next thing is to pull off this guide, which is just these two 10mm bolts. Then you can just pull this
Another tag.
up. Yeah, we got another tag on there. Lots of good parts. So next, the chain comes out. It's always a good idea to order a new one of these, especially on a bike that's sat for a long period of time. I don't know if you can see the rust that's starting to form in the chain. But this one isn't bad. It doesn't have any kinks in it. It moves pretty good, but new chains are $17, so it's just a good investment to keep your chain from being thrown. And then we've got another one of these doodads over here. Got some damage to the counterweight right there, if you can See
yeah,
that?
a little bit.
Something got chunkaged and thrown around in here, so hopefully nothing serious, but we won't know until we get in. Got that wing spun back, and now I'm gonna get that nut off. That one didn't even need heat. Then this comes off like that, and don't forget this little key here that goes in the bottom like that. Now we're going to flip back to the other side and take off these gears. You'll notice that there's two dots right here. I don't know if y'all can see that very well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a dot there and there's a dot there, and they line up, and that's how you time everything, but we'll cover that in
Reassembly.
Now we need to move on to the shifting assembly, which of course can't come out because it's bent. So we got the shift shaft out. I don't know if you'll be able to see, but the tip right here is super bent. And that's what was keeping it from coming out super smooth. But I got it out eventually with a little bit of heat and some minor persuasion with a hammer. So now we're going to take off the rest of this assembly here and the oil pump, which you don't have to take out the oil pump to split the cases, but it is a good idea to check the condition of everything in there, especially in a motor that's as old as this one. So we're just going to take an 8mm, and these bolts will come right out. They are blue Loctited. Whenever you pull out a factory nut in the bottom end, it's a good idea to go ahead and re-Loctite it, just so everything doesn't wiggle out, because these 450s have a lot of vibration. So this is part of the shifting assembly. It's got these two little wings here, some dowels, and some springs behind it. Just if you keep pressure on it, nothing will explode away. You can put that over on the table. And then we've got the actual collar here that attaches to the shift drum. I'm gonna get this bolt out here, which all you need is a 12mm deep well. And your piece here is gonna wiggle on you pretty hard, and it'll probably jump it into first gear. So don't be scared of that. Yeah, see, it jumps it. But that way it locks against the transmission, and then it comes out really simply. I'm gonna pry this bar back after I got that bolt out, and then this assembly here will just wiggle right out, and then you can let the tension off of this. This part doesn't have to come out, again, for splitting the cases, but I'm gonna do it anyway. It just takes a 5mm Allen. It's going to need some persuasion. There it comes. Then you want to be careful because there's a washer behind the spring right there. You don't want to lose that. It helps just keep everything as an assembly. Place it off to the side. So now all your shifting assembly is out of the way. This is your shift drum right there. I'm just going to take out the oil pump here with the same 5mm. There it comes. There are dowels here, so make sure to pull them out. There's the oil pump assembly. You've got one more, this big circle back in here. What was that?
My phone.
This big circle that sits in there, and you can just put everything back together. And we are now almost ready to split the cases. Last thing we need to do is flip this over and get out these case holding bolts. One thing I need to do before I can get those bolts out, since it's actually blocking the bolts, is I need to get this epoxy off of here, which I'm just kind of going to chisel at it with a screwdriver and a hammer. So I'll get back to you guys when I'm done with this. Okay, so I got the clutch actuator arm out. It didn't take very much. I just had to chisel off a little bit on the top right there. Now we need to get off all these case bolts. This one's being a little bit tricky, so I'm going to try and get an Allen as straight of an angle as I can on it, and then I'm going to take an adjustable crescent wrench, and I'm going to tighten it around the Allen, and I'm going to try and use that to get my leverage on the bolt. So here we go. Got it. Somebody really tighten these down. Okay guys, I got all those bolts out. Had to do a little bit more finessing there, but now we're gonna bring the cases and set them on my homebrew engine stand.
Okay, this is a really terrible angle.
So we're just gonna set it like that, and that's where we're gonna leave this video because I don't want it to get super long. So thank you guys so much for watching, and part 2 will be coming up just a couple days from when this video gets posted. And we'll be going into the bottom end with the transmission and the crankshaft and all that scary stuff. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.